Hello, everybody, and thanks for watching one more Epidose of the Ketogenic Fasting Project. Today, I'm talking about 10 myths about food. I think these are 10 of the myths that contribute to people believing that a meat-based diet is not ideal or less than ideal. And of course, I believe the exact opposite. I think an animal-based diet is optimal for human beings. And I think the amount of plant food or plant-based food that we can consume really depends on the individual and the individual's tolerance for different factors. So every day you will see studies that come out or articles about studies that talk about food and what we should eat and what was found in a laboratory somewhere or what somebody spotted when they compared studies, or there's all kinds of epidemiological studies. There's science that's done in a petri dish, and that stuff trickles out into all sorts of articles. But one of the things they don't do is they don't contrast that to what we know the diet has been for the last 3.7 million years or so. I think it's a point to bring up. It was thought that human beings been eating meat for 400,000 years because we had archaeological evidence, and then it went to like a million and a half years, and then 2 million years, 3 million years. Now it's at least 3.7 million years worth of archaeological evidence and hard science like the nitrogen isotopes and the carbon isotopes in the collagen preserved in the fossils and so on and so forth, that demonstrates that we didn't just eat meat, we ate a lot of meat. And we weren't just predators, we were apex predators. We were predators that ate predators. So when you see a study, you should keep in mind that we have the evidence for us eating meat, even in the form of pre-humans. But we don't have hardly any evidence for eating plants until 40 or 50,000 years ago, which isn't that long ago when you put it on a scale of 3.7 million years. If you're curious about that, watch the movie online, In Search of the Perfect Human Diet. And then there was another video I was going to recommend, is Barry Groves. Watch Barry Groves. That's a good video. He talks about humans being carnivores. So that would be myth number one. A lot of these studies are done with the presumption or the assumption that humans are supposed to eat plants. So you got to realize that when you're looking at the study, they aren't thinking of it based in terms of what we already know based on the archaeological evidence or the fossil evidence. Myth number two, animals are raised for food are always suffering. But the truth is what makes us human is that we know how to be humane. And yes, sometimes animals do suffer. There is factory farming that a lot of people find abhorrent. And I think that's one of the big changes is people are aware of that. And, carnivores in particular are aware of it. And they don't want that cruelty to go on either. And so there's a lot of effort to support cruelty-free or low cruelty farming methods. I mean, a lot of people, if at all possible, want to just eat grass-fed, grass-finished cattle, and then it comes down to humanely dispatching that animal. So that's what happens most of the time anyways. There's rumors going around. I've never seen the evidence, but some of that video that the vegan propagandists like to show where animals are being tortured and stuff, they actually paid people overseas to be cruel to the animals in front of the camera so they could use it for propaganda. Because of course it's very hard to get into a lot of the farms, especially the big industrial farms where they raise animals. But of course, like where I live, you see cattle walking around all over the place. They don't look particularly distressed to me. Sure. So anyways, I think that's myth number two that kind of is implanted in our minds. And I talked about cartoons and stuff like that. And I mentioned Bobby Guy. At the moment, I couldn't remember what movie he was critiquing, but it was Animal King, or not Animal Kingdom. What's the one with the lion, the Lion King? I haven't actually seen it. I saw the play a long time ago, but I haven't seen the animated one or the new version that's just new fancy animation. I haven't seen that, but it's interesting because we see the same thing in Bambi. You know, you got these animals. I remember there's a little rabbit named Thumper, and there's a skunk. They all have, great personalities and stuff, but it really has nothing to do with nature. It's like the entertainment denatures nature, right? So I think that's a big part of it. Animals aren't people, but in all this entertainment, they're giving people like personalities, and then everybody assumes. I've had this discussion with people online that, like, every cow is tortured and miserable, every chicken is tortured and miserable, every hog is tortured and miserable, and that's not how it is. But in nature, these animals torture you and kill each other. They get eaten alive. They freeze to death. They get swarmed by fleas, and mosquitoes. They get crazy diseases. That all kinds of stuff happens, and that's just how nature's been from the beginning. But as human beings, we can have livestock that's treated humanely, and that's the difference. So I think that's just one more lever point that people try and use to convince us that humans weren't supposed to eat animals, when in fact we've eaten animals since the beginning. And that's what allowed us to become human beings. So it's what allowed us to develop a brain and to be self-aware, was eating animal flesh, not plants. So that's myth number 2. Myth number 3 is a little more subtle, and it's the comment you frequently hear to eat a healthy diet. I have this discussion frequently with people. It's like, well, you got to eat a healthy diet, or I eat a healthy diet, or we eat pretty healthy. Well, what is that? You can ask 10 people and get 10 different answers, obviously. So I think people are kind of deluded into thinking that they're eating wheat or grain, whole grain, that's healthy. They're eating brightly colored fruits and vegetables that's healthy. They buy something at the store in a package with a little logo on it, heart healthy or whatever. They think it's healthy. And of course, none of that's true. It's all just delusional BS. None of that stuff in the produce section was created by nature. It's all farmed. It's all laden with chemicals. It's, grown almost exclusively with fertilizers derived from petro derivatives, oil derivatives. So it's not very little of it is sustainable, and none of it was created by nature or God, if that's how you want to view it. It's all created by man, and most of that work was done because this stuff was around and it just wasn't edible. It didn't look good. It didn't taste good. It was hard to grow. The bugs were always winning. The animals would steal it. And so man had to make it for himself because he just wasn't content eating meat. But meat is really the base of the human diet. At least that's what I believe. So there is no such thing as just knowing what a healthy diet is until you've worked it out for yourself. And for people like me, it's eating meat. It's a meat-based diet. So that is myth number 3. And myth number 4 isn't much different. Myth number 4 is eat a balanced diet. But what is a balanced diet? I mean, you can look at all these charts and graphs and stuff, and my plate and the pyramid, and it'll say so many servings of fruits, so many vegetables, so many of grains, so eat a little meat, eat a little dairy, have a little cheese. None of that has anything to do with balance. You look at the quantities don't balance anything. So this whole concept of eating a balanced diet or eat a variety is just utter nonsense. It's just hot air. And if you, again, if you ask 10 people or 100 people, they'll give you 10 or 100 different answers, right? There's nothing there. There's no there, right? A human being is a meat machine, right? Maybe we have a soul. Maybe we have something more to us than just flesh and blood. But the body is made of meat. The brain is mostly fat and water, right? We developed this brain because we ate meat and all that fat and protein was readily available. It had very little to do with plants, other than we ate less plants. So it only makes sense that our original food is not the thing that's killing us. It's everything else. It's not cholesterol. It's not the problem. Fat is not the problem. Protein is not the problem. It's everything else. It's the processed foods. It's the seed oils. It's the high carbohydrate diets. I mean, sure, it's reasonable to think that human beings can tolerate a certain amount of carbohydrate. And some people, particularly people in endurance sports, probably can enhance their performance with carbohydrate. You can replenish your glycogen stores faster. You can perhaps metabolize through more channels simultaneously if you add in some carbohydrates. So there's some advantages to it. And some people inevitably are probably better adapted to ingesting certain types of carbohydrates than others. But it's not necessary for life, and it's clearly has not been demonstrated that you're going to be healthier and live longer. That doesn't mean you can't eat any carbohydrates. But for people like myself, you find out when you really look into this that you are healthier without them, and that the less of it you eat, the better off you are. The happier you are, the better your mood is, the more productive you are, the faster you put on muscle, the faster you get your body fat to a desirable level, and so on and so forth. So that's myth number 4. Eat a balanced diet. It's ridiculous. Myth number 5, I'm gonna just tear into this just a little bit because a lot of people have gone down this road. And I did a video about this a long time ago. There is a book called The China Study. The book is about one of the study observers' interpretation of something that's known as the China Study. The book itself is not just data from the actual China Study. The author, T. Colin Campbell, talks about what he thinks is compelling evidence from the China Study and other studies that he worked on. But I think I found out, like a lot of people, and I said this before, a lot of people told me to read that book. I read that book, or I listened to that book. I listened to that book on Audible at least twice, and some parts of it more than once. I don't think it holds up to the test of time at all. And I think the one thing that I'm sure about is everybody who told me to read that book didn't read that book. It's another one of those things where people have an impression of what's in the China Study. People tell them about the book and they never read it. They might read a caption or a paragraph or some bulleted list or something. But I think most people are discerning enough that when they read it, they go, yeah, this thing is full of holes. The author comes to these conclusions and pushes this agenda, but there's so many possibilities here. There's no way this is actual evidence. But I hear it come up a lot. I hear a lot of people say, oh, when they heard about the China Study, that was one of the things that convinced them to go vegetarian or go vegan. I certainly know it influenced my diet before I actually read it. So I put that on my list of food myths, number 5, the book, The China Study. I encourage people to read it. And then, I think it was Denise Menger who really tore it apart. I mean, piece by piece. She did a great job. She's probably tired of talking about it. Hopefully T. Colin Campbell's tired of defending it because it's pretty sad. So that's myth number 5. And then the next one is eat lots of fruits and vegetables. Because here's the question. Do you really like them? Hey, Let me first admit, perfect banana tastes great. But you know what happens? I used to eat bananas and apples and oranges and stuff like that all the time. I did notice, first of all, oranges or any citrus and pineapple seem to give me sores in my mouth if I ate more than one once in a while. Honeydew, same thing. I liked eating bananas, but you know what? There's way too much sugar in there for me. Apples, even apples. I'd eat an apple in the car on the way to work a lot. And I noticed when I get out of the car and I got to work, my joints hurt even more. Still too much sugar. And I gotta say, I grew up eating vegetables, spinach, carrots, whatever. We ate all that stuff, tomatoes, and a little of it probably doesn't matter. Lettuce is pretty innocuous. It's basically just a watery, crunchy vegetable with very little nutrition. But tomatoes are in the nightshade family. They cause problems. I know if I eat certain types of tomatoes, especially a little tomato, cherry tomato ones, they can cause some problems. A lot of people can't eat the seeds or the skin. Same thing is true of the other nightshades. And there's no evidence that we need it. They talk about all these micronutrients. If you watch that movie, The Martian, and then you read about, some of the logic behind it. I remember them talking about, well, yeah, if you had to live on one thing, a potato was probably the perfect food. But that doesn't hold any water. It really doesn't have enough nutrients. It really is a starchy tuber that needs to be cooked and broken down. And hey, having starchy tubers available to us when we learn to cook as primitive human beings or pre-human beings, having another source of nutrition to get us by was probably advantageous, because prior to that, we probably would have had a very hard time getting any sort of energy out of it, much less other nutrients. That's all probably true, but our physiology really suggests that we have evolved to be meat eaters, large-brained, small digestive tract creatures that do best eating fatty meats, brains, bone marrow, muscle tissue, organs, the whole 9 yards. That's where we really thrive. So number 6 was eat lots of fruits and vegetables. It's a myth. Number 7, substitutes for real food. Why? Okay. I know there's a joke going around. There's a picture, presumably from Florida, last hurricane. Supermarkets kind of cleaned out. Only thing left is a vegan food. You look there and you see like sausages and cheese and stuff like that. And of course, it got out this Wonder, what's it called? Wonder meat or whatever. It's coming out. You see it in the fast food restaurants. It's a fake meat substitute. And there was other substitutes before that. It's like, why eat a substitute food? You really aren't happy, or is this some sort of gateway thing where they're like, we're going to get these people to eat hamburgers and we're going to convince them to eat this fake hamburger made out of plants. When we're going to make up stuff, we're going to get ingredients approved that were previously not allowed or thought to be somewhat dangerous, so that we can get something that's close to a real hamburger. And it's going to be more expensive, and it's going to require all kinds of people to invest all kinds of money. And then maybe down the road, we're going to have lab-grown meat, which is going to require us to suck the juices out of a cow embryo. I mean, this is beyond Soylent Green. This is like we're gonna create stuff to be like something else. I think that one of the reasons why cooking is such a big deal to people is because in the past, sometimes people had to eat really low quality food, and particularly a lot of plants and stuff like that. They didn't taste good, so they had to find ways to make them more appetizing. Or maybe they had to eat meat that was spoiled or really poor quality meat, animals that weren't particularly tasty or delicious. And so they had to come up with ways to make them more tasty and delicious. Because I think most people eat meat on a regular basis, realize that they don't really need to dress up the meat. Maybe some salt, maybe some pepper, but most people don't require a lot of fixing. But when you drift away from that, it becomes more and more important to sort of hide the food and make it taste like something else. And I almost think that all this interesting fancy cooking is kind of a negative for everybody because it takes you a step closer to the fake food, the substitutes. But I think that most people will agree that fake foods are not good. Processed foods are not good. So why introduce these newer and newer fake foods? And why try and give people the impression that they're healthier? You know, you see these commercials like, oh, these people are doing yoga or something, you know, they're healthy people, and that's why they eat these fake meats. Why eat fake meat? You either don't, you know, you can eat all those ingredients without all the additives and colors and processing in their natural plant form if that's what you really think you need to eat. So anyways, I think it's a bad idea. I don't think there's too many people that think processed food is a good idea, but I do think a lot of people invested a lot of money into this concept and they want to sell it to you and they want to take your money and feed you garbage. So that's why number 7 is stay away from substitute foods. Don't fall for it. The other thing is that the advice to eat plant-based foods comes from a person of knowledge and or authority when it really comes from religion. It's no secret. A lot of people have talked about it. Seventh-day Adventists in particular, you know, the story of Ellen G. White. She's a young girl. She gets hit in the face with a rock by another little girl. You know, it's probably a hard story to hear in this day and age when men do all the evil. But anyways, she gets hit in the face with a rock. She supposedly has this vision from God, and people are supposed to eat plants and not eat animals. Okay, you want to believe that, you go right ahead. But you got to realize that these are the people who eventually went on to create the American Dietetics Association and stuff like that. And a lot of these panels that hand down these recommendations, like saying a vegan diet is good for all ages and stuff like that. These panels are mostly made up of vegans and vegetarians. Quite a few of them come from Seventh-day Adventists. And then, you know, sometime before I was born, well, that was in the 1800s when that started. And of course, there's a crazy story of the Kellogg's and everything and the cornflake. And that was all about repressing people's libido because it was known that if you feed people all this grain, their sex drive goes down. And if their sex drive goes down, then they're living better lives, you know. And so that had you know, Kellogg worked for the Seventh-day Adventists as typesetter as a young man and learned all this stuff and went on to invent the cornflake and, you know, donate the land that I went to university on, you know, Cal Poly Pomona, as well as all kinds of other stuff. You want to see a funny movie about this, watch The Road to Wellville, and you'll see how ridiculous it was. And that's where all the breakfast cereal stuff began. There was no breakfast cereal before that. So, and then, of course, let me go to a period of time before I was born, you know, the hippie culture, the importation of religion and ideas from India. A lot of people in India are vegetarians. Of course, when Carenson did his study on deficiencies, he found that the people, I believe it was in the north, that ate the most animal fat and animal protein. They ate a lot of dairy, not as much meat perhaps, but a lot of dairy, a lot of cheese, a lot of butter. But they also did eat meat regularly. They were the longest lived people in the country, not the vegetarians. Okay. And one of the reasons this is because in India, the cow is revered and worshipped and stuff like that. So again, we see another religious influence in this concept of not eating meat and eating vegetables or being a vegetarian or being a vegan. So I think one of the myths is that our our pressure to eat plant-based diets is based on science when it's really rooted in religion that's somewhat disguised. And I think those are two of the biggest influences right there. So that's myth number 9 or number 8, that this idea that we need to eat a plant-based diet or a plant-heavy diet, or that you need all these fruits and vegetables and grains, is based in science, when it's really based in religion, a religion that I don't believe in, most people don't believe in. And even if you wanted to believe in some of that, you don't necessarily have to believe that eating meat's bad for you. So myth number 9 is that we don't have the teeth or the digestive tract to eat meat. I've seen the videos, I've heard the explanations. I long before I took an interest in this, I heard that. But if you go look at the teeth of a gorilla, now a gorilla spends like 80% of his waking hours chewing on twigs and leaves, and he has big canine-like teeth and stuff. Very dangerous animal, not that different. But he also has a digestive tract with a giant cecum where he can ferment that vegetation. Human beings have a tiny little vestigial sort of organ that was a cecum. And that's because most of our nutrition is designed to be absorbed in the upper intestine or the small intestine, where high quality nutrition like animal flesh, the muscle, the meat, the fat, everything is quickly absorbed, and very little goes through from there. We don't have a giant cecum or colon that's really designed to ferment and produce all the fatty acids that a gorilla does, or a monkey. Monkeys and chimps, they eat more fruit and they don't have to spend as much time eating, but they still are. In some of those monkeys, they just juice fruit, suck it down, and that's what they live on. They move and they eat very quickly, but they have to spend far more time doing it, and they have smaller brains, right? And we have a big, expensive brain that takes up a lot more of our energy from our food. So we don't have the multi-chambered stomach of a cow, and we are not like other animals that have even single chambered stomachs, like sheep and stuff like that, or goats, where they eat. A lot of these animals, they chew their food, they swallow it, and then they chew it again, right? The ruminants. And then a lot of them, including monkeys and stuff like that, they actually have to eat their feces so that they get the material to go through their digestive tract one more time, so they can extract some more nutrients out of it after it's broken down a little bit more. Human beings aren't designed to do that. And so that's myth number 9, myth number 9, that we don't have the teeth or the guts to be meat eaters, that we're actually designed to be plant-based eaters, because we actually have the pH in our stomach of more of a scavenger. So the pH in our stomach is more adjusted to eating meat, more like a dog or something like that, or even a vulture or something like that, as opposed to a herbivore, a plant-eating animal, because that more intense stomach acid actually is not as good for eating plants, because it doesn't allow us to ferment the vegetation as well. So that's myth number 9. We don't have the teeth in the digestive tract. We do. So, and I think the 10th one is this one that we see all over the place. It's RDA, recommended daily amounts. So if you look at packaged food, it says on there, this product contains this and that amount of a recommended daily amount of a given vitamin or nutrient or whatever. Now, that was all based on asking people, particularly nutritionists and doctors, what they thought was the proper amount. And this doesn't start until this sort of technology and the discovering of vitamins really doesn't come along till in the last 100 years or so. And these RDAs were really just about opinion. There wasn't really a good way to nail down what was the recommended amount of vitamin A or fatty acids or omega-3 or whatever. So you see that and you look at the recommended amount and you assume that it's tethered to some sort of science. and most of the time it's not. So if you're like me and a growing number of people, and what you eat is meat, people like us have never been studied. Nobody knows. You think you'd eat all this vitamin C, but then you find out, well, lots of people lived on meat for thousands of years or millions of years, and they weren't eating a bunch of vitamin C, but they don't seem to be vitamin C deficient. There's no scurvy. In fact, the whole thing about, citrus and vitamin C was really, that was the backup if you didn't have fresh meat to eat. If you have fresh meat to eat, you never get scurvy. But everybody focuses on the citrus aspect and the vitamin C. Not too surprising, because that was used to sell things that contain vitamin C, like citrus fruits, and you can actually get more vitamin C from eating spinach. But then if you don't eliminate oxalates very well, then you create a whole new problem. So I think myth number 10 is the RDA, recommended daily amounts. I think that it's a sort of straw man sort of idea of, it's used in marketing all the time. And, food products are forced to have labels. It's packaged food in the United States, got to have that label on it. I'm sure a lot of other countries use something similar. So I think that's myth number 10. So there's 10 myths for you to kind of explain why eating a plant-based diet is supposedly a good idea. Again, they're myths. And that's part of the reason why I think eating an animal-based diet is actually healthier, and why it works so well for people like myself and a growing number of other people. So anyways, that's it. 10 myths. Thanks for watching. Appreciate any support. Please subscribe. Please hit the little bell icon so you get a notification when the video comes out. Please leave me comments. Come join us, the Ketogenic Fasting Project, on Facebook. Autistic Carnivores. If you or somebody in your family is autistic, on the spectrum somewhere, come and join us. Join the conversation. You don't have to be a carnivore. You yourself don't have to be autistic. It's a great group. It basically just helps people help each other. And if you want to look up studies and videos and stuff like that, go to carnivoreinfo.com. I'm in lots of other great groups on there too. So if you got a little niche, particular disease, you want to talk about autoimmune disease, you want to talk about psoriasis, arthritis, or any of those other things, come and join us. Find some new friends online and join the conversation. Thanks again.